Like, isn't it so interesting how much homoeroticism there's with Trump and his artwork of like his muscles and how these like evangelical or right-wing men are obsessed over his like glorified body that they're creating, but yet they want to ban Grinder or, call out gay people for being sinful while they're like figuratively or maybe even literally masturbating to these homoerotic images of Trump. Like, what's going on here? Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby, aka Andrew. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcast. And before you hear today's episode, which I just know you're going to love, can you please do me a favor? And wherever you're listening, if it's Spotify or Apple, please rate and review us. Make sure you're following the podcast. Share it with friends, family, anyone you think would just love hearing this conversation. And you can watch our podcast on YouTube. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. It's called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and you'll see the video episode. So please make sure you like the video you're watching and comment. I always respond to the comments. Also, we have a Patreon. So if you don't want any of the ads and you want bonus material, join our Patreon. There's a 1 week free trial. It's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And the free trial is for the professor level. Without further ado, here is today's exciting episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really excited to be joined with Frank Pizzoli, who is just such a fabulous voice when it comes to gay interviewing, his long career in publishing, journalism. He has such amazing interviews he just conducted for his new book. It is called Passionate Outlier: Gay Writers and Allies on Their Work. And I just want to read a quick blurb from Patrick Merla, who is the former editor of Christopher Street. He says, Frank Pizzoli is the ideal interviewer, smart, well-informed, interested in his subjects and the worlds in which they operate, and thoroughly engaging as a writer. So, with that being said, not that Frank, you have to live up to all of that, but it's so exciting to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity with Ivory Tower. And I hope I can live up to Patrick's kind words. To me, that means a lot. He was editor of major publications, and that means a lot.
Well, with Passionate Outlier, you have 20 really prominent gay writers, some who sadly have passed away, like Felice Picano, Edmund White, but you also have some very contemporary writers like Michael Carroll, who, Edmund White was his partner, but Christopher Bram. I'm just curious, like, are these writers you've known for a while, or did some of them enter your orbit recently as you were working on this book?
Actually, it goes back quite a few years. The 20 interviews start with 2007 and end at 2019.
Mm.
And I was thinking about an interview with Edmund White, an interesting story, and I contacted a friend in Key West and who said, "Oh," and I mentioned that just nonchalantly in the conversation. I'd like to interview Edmund White, and he said, "I'll be having dinner with him tomorrow night. Would you like me to ask him on your behalf?"
Mm.
So of course I said yes, and the message back from my friend was, "I'm here on holiday, January holiday, and wait for me to get back and contact me then." And I did. Here's what's really amazing about it, and we can explore this more. So I'm holding my breath as I'm opening an email from Edmund White, and it's about 2.5 sentences. It's lowercase. no special punctuation. Hi, great. Let's do it this way. Here's my address. Great resume, by the way. Looking forward to it. And I thought, wow, just like you and I. And that began a very warm, and I, through the years, have learned that certainly this is his relationship with many, many, many people with whom he interacts. And from there, one thing just led to another, as it always does when you start a process like this.
Hmm. So was Edmund White a figure, like a writer who had really shaped your own growth in terms of gay literature?
Yes, I think when a Boy's Own Story came out, that was probably the first book. Well, for many of us, it was not probably. It was, as Edmund said in his own words, we finally began writing about ourselves for ourselves, not in relationship to anything else except ourselves. And that was, think about it, it's 1981, 1982. Stonewall happens in 69. I was 18 years old when Stonewall happened. And the only books that we had out then were gay people in all of our manifestations living in relationship to straight society. So we really weren't telling our story. We were telling our story in relationship to how we survived, the lies we told, the twists we had to turn our bodies and minds and souls into to survive professionally, to survive in families, to survive in relationships. And here along comes the one who says, a boy's own story. And that really, there were people that never read a book from cover to cover that I would pass it around to that said, yeah, where's there more? I want to read more like this. So he really had a profound impact, not only on readers, but on attracting new readers.
Hmm. And I love what you do in your interview with him is, for everyone listening, this is why you need to get your hands on Passionate Outlier, is you actually chart like his genealogy with openly gay writers. Like you actually start with Gore Vidal's The City and the Pillar, which I've always found to be when I was in my PhD studies, I got so excited when I discovered it just because I mean, some credit it as the first American openly gay novel. I think that's debatable. But all that aside, I think what he says about Gore Vidal obsessing over straight sailors and like his character trying to bed straight sailors and like just the way that gay literature now in 2025 has really expanded from that. It's interesting to chart these decades. Like, what's your feeling about Gore Vidal's The City and the Pillar?
Well, first of all, it was the first of his kind. And I've always had an interesting relationship uh, uh, with Gore Vidal from a great distance. He is not included in the book. He unfortunately for me. He went on to whatever it is, wherever it is we go, before I could actually get to him, and had made an entree through one of the other writers in the book, Sean Struve, who was the person whom I knew, who was the only person whom I knew could actually get to him. Uh, and it was about 6 weeks before Vidal's passing that I had made my plea to Sean, and he in turn informed me about his health status. Um, Now, with A Boy's Own Story and or excuse me, with Gore Vidal's book, he was blacklisted. He paid a real heavy duty price for that. He was about to enter politics. It goes back that far. He had done his time in the Navy. He had governor of New Mexico, who was a close friend of his grandfather, the senator, who gave him his early political education, had him all, let's say, quote unquote, lined up to be an elected delegate to the 1948 Democratic National Convention. And that would have began his arrival, so to speak. Not that someone with his political pedigree would need much of an announcement, but he would indeed be there. And so that was all said and laid on. And lo and behold, he decides to publish the book. It comes out. Well, it put a damper on all of that. That is an interesting piece of our history. My personal history, my father was an elected delegate in the 1948 Democratic National Convention. And I often wondered, oh my word, they could have, I was born in 51. That would have been before my birth. He would have been standing at a political event, states apart, but there would have been Gore Vidal and my father performing the same function of democracy, and that's trying to come up with a presidential candidate for one of the two major parties. The other interesting thing is, I was a Boy Scout, and I would go swim at a couple of towns away on Friday nights, go for a group swim, and at a YMCA where all the boys swam naked, comma, think about that for a moment, audience. And I would come back late on Friday night. And at 9:30 or 10:30, I don't remember, that was the week that was, which was kind of like a UK Saturday Night Live. So it was all panel. And then Jack Parr, after Steve Allen, Jack Parr was the next talk show host, and he would often have Gore Vidal on. And my mother would say a day or two ahead, Gore Vidal's on Jack Parr Friday night. You can stay up late enough to watch if you want. And I look back and I think, moms always know. I had no concept. I was 10, 11 years old. I had no concept of me, him, or much about the world. But I just loved listening to him. The whole family would gather and listen and watch. And once in a great while, she would mention him, and we'd do a little back and forth, and she'd put a clue in and give me a factoid. And I always remembered that.
Wasn't there's a really notable in talk show appearance of his. I'm trying to remember. He's debating
He's
another
debating
author.
William F. Buckley Jr., and they're at a convention in Miami, and it's 1980, uh, uh, I believe, and they're doing commentary for the network. And of course, that's drudgery. I mean, you're up, you don't get any sleep. It's a whole week long. You're talking to most of the people you're talking to, you don't really want to talk to, but you have to. And so here they are being paid to perform, so to speak. An interesting sidebar, how the conversations they would have about giving the audience a good show. I found that very, very interesting in my research. And they get into the fag thing. Don't you tell me that I'll sock you good and you'll stay socked, is what William F. Buckley says in his best boarding school accent that he can give them. And so he and Vidal are it's like two hissing snakes at one another. It's out there. It comes back. It comes back almost annually. I mean, because there's a hook to something or other that is always there.
Mm.
He had the same relationship with Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer and William F. Buckley had the same kind of relationship. They made a lot of money going around the country doing tours, speaking tours, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And in fact, there are credible, quotable witnesses who would hear them afterwards smile and sort of pat each other on the back and say, "Well, I guess we gave them a good one there, didn't we?"
Mm.
And so I began to see them in that light also. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we do. Here we are promoting my book. That's what you do when you write a book and when you do those sort of things. But the behind the scene, the backstory was interesting. You had also mentioned Christopher Bram in his book, Eminent Outlaws, Gay Writers Who Shaped Literature. That is an absolutely fascinating book because it starts with Gore Vidal and it sort of ends with Edmund White. And in conversations around the interview, before the interview, after the interview with Chris, interesting how he, adding to the credibility of his own work, He said, I had very good standards, very high standards. If I could not follow it through and document it in a certain way, I took it out of the manuscript. He wanted to know that what he was telling people, they could actually find in the evidence of other people's writings and reprints and other books. And I, I went back and read sections of the book again simply because I began to realize what a monumental effort he had been successful at. That was years and years of work and tons of research.
Well, and when you were growing up, like you've mentioned, your mom letting you watch programs with Gore Vidal, but who do you attribute to, whether it's your own coming out journey or just do you remember specifically a book that has stayed with you since you were an adolescent?
One of them because it has certain affections for me. My godmother had given me on my 10th birthday a book about Abraham Lincoln. Now I forget, there are literally thousands of books written about Abraham Lincoln. But upon presenting the book to my mother to ask if it is this okay, and my mother said, "Oh, I think he would really enjoy this." And they both said, "We think we have a historian in the family." Why they said that, I have no idea. So my mother passed it on. Now, I grew up in a reading family. There were bookcases. My mother was involved in the ladies' club locally that established the first library. She served on a governor's library commission, or was invited to, and then asked if I could step into that role, given her age and health circumstances at the time. And so I grew up with being around books and pulling them off the bookcase and opening them up. Interestingly enough, I'd open up a book that I really enjoyed and I'd read the first sentence and I would say, "How did he know to write that?" I thought when you sat down and the book had your name on it, you knew the first, the second, all the way through to the last word when you sat down with a pencil and a paper. I was just absolutely mesmerized by the process, threatened by it, intimidated by it, but I could not let it go. And I started, as you'll see, readers will see in my introduction, I'm age 10 and we start the Daily Blab, which was a little newspaper that we had three paying subscribers. We would pay 5 cents for a ream of paper. We would go to an Encyclopedia Britannica. For those below a certain age, all this used to be in books, and you had to go to a bookcase and look it up. And we would pick out something we thought was interesting, and then we would ask a question or two of people we knew in our block, and then we would write down their answer, and then we would write out we had three subscribers. The paper we used cost a nickel, and my uncle would put it. My uncle was a butcher grocer, and we'd make a couple extra, and he'd put them out on his counter. So he was our distribution. He got such a kick out of doing that. We were kids. We thought, oh, he really believes we're doing a newspaper. Uh, and so that got me started, and that kept it going for a while. They were in a family archive that got destroyed by some bad conditions in a garage. Or I'd hold one up now, look at it, and show everybody.
And you're from central Pennsylvania, right?
I'm from South Central Pennsylvania, and when I say where I'm from, I giggle. I'm proud of this. I grew up in a place. If you were going to be born in the no longer functioning as a coal region economy in the anthracite coal region, I grew up at a time when it was probably one of the best times to grow up there. It was literally a highway, a street, an alley, a street, an alley, and a row of coal breakers, and it was a mile long, and that was the whole show. That was the whole show. There were probably, in my lifetime, probably about 12 to 1,500 people who maybe lived there. It was probably never more than 1,800, and now I don't know. Now I don't know many people who were there when I go back.
Mm. Yeah, I have memories of um Knobles, if you know.
Knoebels Grove was
Yes.
15 minutes away. It's where I first danced with girls at parties, at dances,
Oh, wow.
and just to give you a perspective, gasoline was a quarter a gallon, and it cost a quarter to get into the dance. And so, if my buddies and I could get together, if three of us could get together and we could put $1 together, we could get a gallon of gas, drive over, and I'd bum my car from my grandmother, and we would drive over and we'd each have a quarter. And if it was a good Friday night, we'd add a little extra to get a soda.
Yeah, I grew up in South Jersey, and I remember like in Boy Scouts, we had a lot of camping trips at Knoebels amusement park, and just that drive, like past Philly, north, going west, like past Dorney Park, and then like just the woods, the
You
there's
go
some like
past
a
Dorney Park, yeah,
yeah,
and you start seeing coal slag mountains and a
abandoned
pile up.
towns.
Yeah, and you start seeing vehicles and trucks that you've never seen because they don't live in cities. There's no purpose for them to be in cities. And then you would see strip mining operations and the big coal piles where they were loading it down the chutes. I mean, it was just an amazing. And we live in a time now where as a cousin said to me, we're all helicopter parents now. So aren't we? And we laughed at a family reunion function, and I said, yeah, we used to crawl down into inactive coal breakers, down into the main, and nobody said don't do that. Nobody. I mean, the risks that we took. It's amazing.
So, what was your journey, being from like the countryside of coal mining area of Pennsylvania and country and like coming out? Did you feel that there was like I know you've done a lot of work on contributing to, you know, outriders in Pennsylvania or that kind of those discussions. Do you feel like it was rare or frowned upon to be gay? Now that the fall season is here, you may be wondering, okay, I had all of these beach reads, Andrew, but now I don't know what books to read for the fall. Well, guess what? My friends at the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine have you covered. Their new September and October issue, called Forgotten Histories, features wonderful book recommendations, TV shows, and films that help excavate LGBTQ history. So, whether you're interested in learning more about the connection between shopping and the gay community, which, I have a Home Goods and Marshalls addiction, as my fiance knows. They got you covered there. They have an article about the attraction of Confederate gentlemen by the incredible writer Andrew Holleran. There's an article about the French evolution of sexual identities and even the first LGBT riot, which happened in 1953. Go over to glreview.org. You can get either a digital subscription or a print subscription. I love my print subscription, which I'm holding up right here. And with the exclusive code ITBR Choice, you will get a free issue with your subscription. So ITBR Choice, put that in the promo code section and get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review print or digital subscription. I know you're going to love their magazine. Specifically, like
Yeah, I
not
mean,
just
imagine this.
yeah.
It's 1969, and this is an environment that I completed college in. I got there. It was the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement. It was coming to a head. If you read back, and you will see some of this in Martin Duberman's uh, one of his two interviews, where he underscores the fact that we need to learn better and understand that queers of all stripes, no matter where you are on the continuum, historically, we participated in the civil rights movement. Some of whom were some of those people were black. Look at Bayard Rustin,
Mm.
okay, who was held out because he was gay of the March on Washington ceremonies that took place that day. but we were there. The women's movement, we also, the anti-war movement. And so that we had experience, we just never applied it to ourselves. So there I am, a virgin freshman at a state college, which is not far from where, it's a half hour from where I grew up. And we're having demonstrations and calling attention to the war, the Vietnam War effort. And so I'm sort of addressing if I had any internal 18-year-old anger. I was 18 when I first arrived on campus, just turning 18. I sort of got it out through that. And then as I started to talk more, I realized that that wasn't really, really very popular. And at the end of the first year, the president of that college told someone in the student life staff, I don't want him returning here. I don't trust him. This is the first time I've been president of a college, and he's not going to fuck this up for me. Okay, that's basically I'm giving you the shorthand there. So talk to him, and this person intervened kindly in my behalf, who said, "I'm going to talk to him, and if I keep an eye on him, so to speak, and I'll, talk to him regularly, would you let him come back?" So that was the conversation I had with that gentleman who said, Frank, this is really serious. When the president of a college says he doesn't want you here, okay, please say yes or you're not coming back. And you probably won't get into any other college. If that gets out. And I thought, for speaking my mind, for sharing my thoughts, for living my life as who I am. Now, that's not something that happened in a dark alley. That's something that happened in full daylight on a college campus in one of the original colonies. So all of those all men are created equal didn't apply here either, as we're suffering through that now with all sorts of groups are finding out they are once again invisible, or that is the goal. So that is the environment I grew up in. I will tell you that president and his wife had dinner at my junior. By the time I was a junior, I was editor of the student newspaper, and just to rapprochement, I invited him to come to dinner. He had a lousy dinner cooked by me and my roommates. We were all underage. So he said, "Where's the wine?" And we said, "Oh, well, we're all underage. We didn't know if we could or not. We should." And I said, "Well, we didn't want to put you in a compromising situation." And I'll never forget the look on his wife's face over like, and he later said that he really appreciated that. He would talk about that. And so my beginning with it was quite rude in that regard.
So, do you feel that the nostalgia that has really kind of, I would say, returned of that like 1969, this early 70s, do you feel like Hair the Rock musical was that an adequate representation, or was that kind of like a Woodstock fantasized version of what was going on?
Well, I mean, it was commercial art, so to speak. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron or some, you know, but it was there. It was part of it. It was glossed and overexpressed in ways that commercial art has to be and often is. You're charging a price. It's not like you're going to a museum and if you like a painting, you'll buy it, but it doesn't cost to go to see them or to a gallery, or the cost is minimum. So a lot of those representations were not incorrect in their basic premise that we exist. I mean, think about it. That was the starting point, was to visually and then add words to it. Hey, we are here. We had just gone through the 50s period, which again, Duberman will talk about and some of the others, where there are how many communists in the State Department and how many of them are gay and then how many of them aren't, and who's who. And just like now, we're finding out all the people who are homophobic, darn ain't they in the closet. Well, I shouldn't say all. But the people who feel compelled to get it, stand on a beer box, so they're taller than everyone else, and espouse their baloney about why homosexuality is wrong. I'm just amazed at how many of them are homosexual.
Well, I was just listening to this podcast I love called I've Had It, and they were talking um two female hosts and their guest who's an actress, Sophia Bush, and talking about like, isn't it so interesting how much homoeroticism there's with Trump and his artwork of like his muscles and how these like evangelical or right-wing men are obsessed over his like glorified body that they're creating, but yet they want to ban Grinder or, call out gay people for being sinful while they're like figuratively or maybe even literally masturbating to these homoerotic images of Trump. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and I don't have any answers that I mean, first of all, if they are unaware of that those are dangerous people.
Mm-hmm.
If you can hold, when Bill Maher said, whom I've interviewed two or three times, and not in this book because it wouldn't fit, said, "Oh yeah, my right to take away your right." They're all into that. They just have no capacity to apply it to themselves. And that if someone can say and do those things and not be aware, not going wink wink along the way, that's a seriously deranged, that's an individual I would not want to be around.
It sounds
And if they
sociopathic.
are winking, well, okay, then you're just a rotten SOB like we thought you were, and you do know what this is all about. Like the first and second rung circles around MAGA and White House and all of that, they know exactly what they're doing. And it's kind of like sometimes I want to say that leaders who would put all this stuff out, the only thing they want up their ass is to hand with the people manipulating them.
Mm,
I mean, that's
it,
one.
it is
Yeah,
true.
they're getting it. They're just not getting it the way they complain we go about it. Yeah. But it's just that is scary to me. Everybody grew up with the bully that you later mature enough to know that, yeah. And I say this figuratively, not literally. Yeah, that's what small dick energy is.
Yes.
That, that
Yes.
that's really what it is. It comes in many, many forms. It's kind of like the guy that rides around with the fake police lights on the top of his truck, who's kind of the assistant fire chief of the this, that, and he's always racing around like he's going to 9/11. And I got all this just, I mean, I came across uh, I came across and watch. He'll end up watching this, but I came across a vehicle, let's just say nearby, and it had a Bigfoot sticker. It had a sticker saying, my guns,
Hmm.
my pride, and it had a dead pedophile doesn't repeat offend. Think of those three in a row. I'm thinking I don't want to know the driver.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to try and get in there and unravel that brain over what.
Well, there's someone who is here in the town I'm in, and this is like right outside Manhattan. And at our like swim place, he has all these gay for Trump stickers. He like puts stickers on poles. And it's just, I'm thinking to myself, wait, gays for Trump. And then there's like something very ritualistic about the cult thinking that he must be. I think a lot of it is they feel affirmed or they feel like they have belonging because they like now are part of this tribal group of worshiping. But like you said, Frank, this is very dangerous when there are real ramifications of this worship. It's not like you just worship um, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or you're part of a cult fan base. Like, this is a cult fan base that actually is taking away rights and is actually worshiping suffering. And yeah, I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
exactly.
taking away rights and worshiping. And here's the other transgressive part of it. How many times have we read news accounts of adults by age showing up at school board meetings or city council meetings, and they have no students in that district, they're from the other district, or they don't live in the municipality they're talking about. And I think it takes a special kind of mentality, and that is not a compliment, to say, I'm going to go two school boards over and put my 2 cents in about what I think they should do, about which I have nothing to say. I mean, talk about an ego that precedes the body it lives in.
Yeah, it's such fear mongering too. I literally just got into a conversation yesterday with a fitness trainer I really like who like trains me, but somehow, oh, he talked about like how he doesn't like talking with the liberal women in town. And then I was like, oh no, this is taking a turn. And like just the way he tried to rationalize just information that is proven false. Like he was trying to say that Kamala Harris had slaves in her family history, that Biden eulogized a KKK member, like things I literally was showing him fact checked that this is like
Doesn't
in-
work.
incorrect. And he's like, no, Google is owned by the liberals. And then I'm like, whoa. And then I said, I have a PhD in English. Like, I actually can help you
I actually
understand.
read all that stuff you don't have time to read.
Well, that, and also I understand how to research. And like, we need to find fact checked sources. And he's like, well, what sources do you get your information? And I was like, NPR. And he said, no, that's not true. That's not accurate. It's hard to have a
No, that
conversation with someone
it's
like
hard to have a conversation with that. Two things that you jogged with your comments. One of them is, if I want a quick way out, and I know where there's an exit sign identified in advance, I might say to somebody like that, I regret that you're afraid of girls, and then turn around and run as fast as I can. I don't know what else to say. What, are you afraid of them? You sound like, because you can't control them, you got to be, that's the kind of guy that would say, women, what are you going to do? Can't live with them, can't kill them. It's that kind of guy
mm,
would say that. And the other thing that you mentioned is research, and you have to know how. I was an adjunct in a classroom in the late 90s into 2000. It was a 2-year business school. And I was the utility professor, so to speak. I could teach English. I could teach everything nobody else wanted to teach, which is why they hired me. I could do English comp, sociology, psychology, all of those soft. You don't really need that. There's no skills attached to that. Yeah, and along the way, if we need to teach hard skills, we forgot to teach critical thinking skills because we dropped off history and literature and whatever. And I would say you have to write 500 words. And when they got up off the floor, oh my God, 500 words. And I would say, and it can't be about the one grandparent who's still alive or recently deceased that was your favorite. It cannot be about the family pet that you all lived, that you all loved and miss so much now that it's gone. Or it can't be about the one chick we all think maybe did or didn't get an abortion in high school. Other than that, you can write about whatever you want. And they would groan and just guffaw and say, well, what would I write about? And I would say, I don't know, write about something you read. And they would say, but I don't read. And I would say privately, why aren't you embarrassed to say that out loud in front of anybody, let alone classmates and a professor? Why don't you go to the library? No, I can't do that. Um, and I would suggest some things, and they would say, as you did, where did you get that? They didn't like the data. Where did you get that? And if I would, like you, if I would say, well, the US Labor Department has, 14 floors below, you whatever, and this is what is factually happened in at that time. No, no, So I realized then, I mean, the situation we're in right now, sure, we can blame it on individuals or maybe on a small handful of individuals, but something has been afoot in this country, I think, probably since Ronald Reagan took office. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, and I believe in what I call the overlapping sort of layers of history, just like Earth and soil has sedimentary layers. So does our politics and our culture. I mean, under Reagan, we started to deregulate and dismantle the educational system. Seems like it's really served them well. Because now you're talking about your trainer who does not have the intellectual capacity to say hogwash. I'm
Well,
smart enough to know.
I know what's frightening too, Frank, is there was a time, and I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back having a PhD, because I do think, some
Well, you
people can,
should. That's quite an
well,
accomplishment.
yeah, but I'm saying it like in an egotistical way. Like there is
Yeah.
like a type of egotistical padding, but like when you do show your credentials, you would expect that people respect credentials. But now there's been such an attack on education that he was actually like, well, I have a PhD. And I'm like, oh, what's your PhD in? And he said life. And I'm like, okay, this is this is unfortunately the dumbing down of American society has happened.
Yeah.
And it's like what you said, why would people want to brag about not having a literacy understanding? Like that's actually something to be ashamed about.
That is something to be, not being able to read. It just it does an intolerant. Let's just say, okay, that's a throwback to ink on paper, read left to right, turn the page. The point being to not have agency with whatever technologies there are when you're alive, to be able to use them to think through things, solve problems, initiate new problems. I mean, when you say to people, look, the whole enterprise of science is that there will never be no questions. Every solution will embody new questions. Why is it a solution? Why it is and yes, that's very Hegelian.
Hmm.
Hegel, the philosopher, the thesis, antithesis, embodies its own a new thesis and then a new thesis, and it all starts over again. Antithesis, and because we don't live in a static world, and I think that the huge sense of disempowerment, of I need to redress injustices. We're now hearing from the people who either by their own not understanding the world around them or by active measures creating injustices for everybody who wasn't like them. Yeah. And what did you think would happen after Reconstruction in the South?
Hmm.
Right? What they said, okay, if we can't have them as slaves, we can have them, we can make sure they can't vote, we can make a reading requirement. If, you know, when you think about what we just said, if reading is so bad, why do you think during Reconstruction they would say you can't learn how to?
Hmm. Because reading is power, knowledge is power,
Yeah,
critical thinking is power, inquisitive
yeah.
behavior is power. And I think that there's unfortunately, and I actually think that this is where I would ask you, Frank, like, what are your thoughts about the current just publishing of gay literature. Do you think that gay literature is helping shed light on like ideas of alienation, technology, separating people? And are they addressing these types of concerns, do you feel? Now that the college semester has begun, you know that there are so many books that I can't wait to recommend to you all. Well, my favorite independent publisher, Broadview Press, has some incredible books that have just come out. One of them I'm actually using in my writing course. It's called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college by Rachel Tukolsky. It is such an accessible and interesting book that includes writing exercises for your students. I highly recommend it. Another book that you should get your hands on, especially if you are a writing or English professor, is Academic Writing Now by David Starkey. It includes wonderful, popular essays, nonfiction essays that you can use in your classroom, and they cover a wide range of genres. I cannot wait to use them in my courses. And another book just in time for the Halloween season is Vampire Literature and Anthology, co-edited by Robin Warner and Elizabeth Lewis. I had both of them on the podcast, so listen to that episode because you're going to love all of the vampire literature we talk about. Use my exclusive promo code, go to broadviewpress.com and use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off your order. Yes, 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
No, that is a profound question, because if we look at readerships, and you were to look at it according to, let's say we were Acme Publishing House and we wanted to know where to throw the money with our gay imprints, and we would say, well, it looks to be below a certain age group. The demographic is into what I would call a subgenre and subgenre, where it combines a number of thoughts. So it could be about two younger females or females of any age in a relationship, but the relationship is in the context of, a space travel motif, or a crime motif, or a school motif. So there are different layers there. The original works that, for example, when readers look into the interview I did with the Violet Quill, which, just as shorthand, that was 7 writers who met for a little bit of a year. They met 7 or 8 times, depending on whose account you read. If you ask Ed White, what did you do? He said, we divided up the market. I'll write about this, then you write about that, and we won't be competing with one another. We talked more about that than we actually did about our work. We did read some stuff to each other. There's all sorts of background and gossipy and backstory from all of them regarding that. And when I did the interview, there were 3 surviving members. Now, since then, about 3 weeks before the book had its official release, Felice Picano leaves us, and then about a few months after, of course, in June of this year, White leaves us. So we're down to Andrew Holleran, who was the last holdout to do the three of them in the interview, because he said, I've said everything I want to say about that. I don't have anything. I have picked that turkey bone, enough. I said, well, the other two are going to do it. And then he said, oh, well, no, wait now. He rethought that, thankfully. I am so thankful to him. He has some other interesting messages that are in. You talk about dumbing down. I am preparing this book. I am writing the introduction, and I just need a break. So I go and I open a Harper's magazine just to look at something else. And I see in their section where they do excerpting,
Mhm.
the middle bulk of the book there. One of those titles is "Dancer from the Dance," and I thought, oh, I'm Holleran. And I look, and it was a title chosen to for that excerpt, which was about a female dancer. It had nothing to do with Andrew Holleran. I tried endlessly to get comments from to say, who wrote that? How does it? Are you even aware of? Why would you do that? I relayed that to him, and he said, I can't believe there is not an editor at Harper's somewhere along the line under whose eyes that passed didn't say, wait a minute, this is, you don't even, at least you could do is mention Holleran. So you go, that's how down the dumb has gotten.
Hmm.
And those would be educated people, we would imagine, wouldn't you?
Well, and I think that's actually so interesting because something that I love in our conversation or any, you know, gay writer I'm privileged to talk to is I do feel like the genre of gay literature is a very genealogical one. Like it's one where people give credit, people respect the forebearers, and it's just so interesting. Like outside of that genre, there is a lack of referencing. Like even just a little note inspired by Andrew Holleran's iconic novel Dancer from the Dance. Like that's all
Yes,
you need to do,
yes.
and it's not being done.
No, no, it's not. And I will, that gives me an opportunity here to mention two things. In the Violet Quill interview that I do, I make reference to a publication no longer in existence, Soho Weekly,
Mm.
which was started as a competitor to the Village Voice, where I years later ended up written for them since about 2021. They have reviewed the book. Um, and It was written by Dennis Altman, the story, and he called it Faglit Royalty.
That's
And didn't he get in touch with me to say, I'm going to read the book. Uh, you could have asked me about some of those people because I knew them all. And in fact, I wrote the article you made reference to.
mm.
Well, I could never find it. I still can't. I went back out again. The publication's gone. That was years ago. Not everything. I'm going to have to go to some kind of archival, mission and say, do you possibly have the New York City Library probably has a hard copy on a shelf somewhere,
Mhm.
of that. And I was embarrassed. Uh, I'm touched that he would read the book. Someone like him, because he is still active. He's still out there. He's still participating in in many different things. Another interesting story about Andrew Holleran, if I may.
Yes, you may. And also, I've been trying with the Gay and Lesbian Review because they're an incredible supporter of the podcast. And, Andrew Holleran writes for them all the time. And they're like, well, we'd love Andrew Holleran to come on, but he doesn't want to do podcasts.
No,
I
oh
don't
no, no,
take
no,
offense. I don't take offense, though.
oh
I
no,
can
I don't take
understand.
no, I don't take offense either.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, the He's always been that way,
Hmm.
and that is to be respected. And I think generally we all do. He did. It was shared with. I mean, imagine this. Okay, when you say, what is the state of affairs? Where are we now versus where we used to be?
Yeah.
Imagine that it's not quite 10 years after Stonewall, and he is writing letters back and forth to a friend about visits to Fire Island, their visits to Fire Island. He's also going to these rather cool meetings, and he's wondering what he's gonna write about next. And the light bulb goes on, and he says, "Yes, these letters could be the basis of a book." So that's Dancer from the Dance. One thing is, given the descriptions that we've just given in summary fashion of Andrew Holleran, well, gosh, he's anything but the dancer from the dance. When you think about it. So there's that. I find that very interesting. There he is in the publisher's office. Manuscript is ready. He's going to literally ink the contract. And if my memory is intact with it, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He's across the desk from his colleague, and all of a sudden Eric Garber realizes, oh my goodness, my parents are going to know I'm gay. I'm putting the book out. Can you imagine? I wouldn't have never thought of that. And the guy says basically, oh, for goodness sake, just here, you have 2 hours or the end of the day, I forget which was, figure out whose name you want on this or the deal's off, okay? I can't believe we went through this whole thing. And now you bring up, so Andrew Holleran, that's where that comes from. So
Okay.
as much as he is a hero, as he should be, a well-earned moniker on his part, you had asked in a previous email, what did I learn? What did I think? All of these individuals whom I have been lucky to interview, had a very strong sense of genealogy in our own history. I think some of them look back and realize they were writing what they were writing in the context of remembering all of that while they were writing. And also, there are people like you and I the very first time I met Edmund White at his apartment, I told you about the email that I got back that was all lowercase, like, something you'd rip off to a boyfriend or somebody you know well enough you really don't care. He stuck his warm face out the door a little bit. He said, "It could be hard to find. I'm over here." And I go in the apartment, and he's very gracious. And here, you sit here. I'm going to make some tea, and I have some dried fruit. And he's talking to me from the kitchen like he knows me for 30 years. And then he said, "Now it's this kind of tea, and it came from a friend that I met when I lived in Paris, and he continues to send it to me monthly, just as a remembrance. And so here we are, and I have you over there on that side, and that'll be my seat over here." And he was just so enthralled with the experience of it. And we sat down, and he smiles, and I said, "I see you have the questions printed out." And he says, "I'm not reading them. I read them. I read them briefly. I like these things to be very, very fresh." I felt like if he'd have said, "Do you want a grilled cheese sandwich?" And I said yes, he would have then asked, "How brown do you want it grilled?" That was so here we start. My blood pressure is going, you can tell I'm breathing a little faster than usual. Like, okay, here I go. I'm going to interview Edmund White. I'm sitting right in his living room. I can't believe it. I turn on the recorder and I say what I just said to you. And I said, now, except I used the name Edmund Wilson, who I had been reading on the way up on the train. And I went, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry." And he got hysterical. And he said, "Oh, that's hilarious." He said, "We'd both be in a lot of trouble if that were true." And he sort of broke the ice, with that. And then Michael comes through. Michael Carroll, his partner of all these years, his husband in recent years, comes through with a big, big basket of laundry. And Ed says, "It's laundry day for us. If that's going to bother you, he can do it later." And Michael says, "Yes, I can. I don't mind at all, but I am going to have to go in and out." And I say, no, you do whatever it is you need to do. So here I am, and I'm thinking, just like me and you. How about it? Got to get the laundry done, get excited when somebody visits. And I thought to myself, after everything he's been through, he still has that spark of joy. How many interviews has he done? I have an interview that is in my book, that is in the University of Kentucky book, Conversations with Edmund White, uh, where it is where that is also republished there. And I thought, how many interviews did they go through? And they said when they got over 1,000 interviews, they had to stop looking. And they realized, and they said, we got it down to like 235 or 37, and we picked 23. So I felt like I must have done
You were
some
honored.
piece of good
You
work.
were honored.
Because I was aware of the fact that he was probably one of the most interviewed people, and had written for everybody, and so that has been a very warm spot in my heart. Christopher Bram, the same thing. I said, I'm going to take pictures. I just tell you that. I'm going to maybe get a little video. So I like to put that out there so that if you want to, wear something special, or then he said, oh, I'll have to be sure and shave. And he got there that day and he didn't. And we laughed. And it was amazing. He had an office that looked like that was in a shared space, nothing fancy, a couch. He had a computer that looked like my dad's first car. So I said to myself, practical. So it's a thing that actually, remember the ones that used to actually make noise when you would like pull up a file, like
Yeah.
that kind of computer. And we just sat there, and talked and talked and talked. And I had the goofiest looking recorder because it was the last one left at the rental shop that I could put. Everybody else got the good stuff. And I got there late, and I had one the size of a suitcase. And he was very kind to not laugh when he saw that. So it's certainly going all around the circle, uh, has been, and not all of the people are gay. Some of the allies have always been with us.
Mhm.
Uh, Two of them, in addition to those two that passed away, have left us. The equality. What do you think about with equality? When you think of equality, that's where we get to hear from just ordinary people. Some of whom are writers, some of whom are activists, but many of whom are not. Um, I wanted to include that because in doing these, I didn't set out this way, but in doing these, I realized the interconnectedness of all of these authors in when they wrote and the themes they wrote about. So I began to reread some of them after they were all done. It's COVID time. And I said, there's an interconnectedness here that I did not realize as I was doing them from 2007 to 2019. And I really, in reading them again, uh, it always makes you think of other questions,
Yes. Yes.
that you would have asked. And when I think back of who when I started out the interviews, I said, regarding the interviews, I'm going to say to myself what people say about writing a book. Write the book you want to read. And I said, you know what? Ask the questions you want answered. It's not that I wouldn't have any. No one intends disregard for the reader when they say those things. That's a way of saying dig into your own wellspring of authenticity. That's how you're going to get the best work done, is if you satisfy your own curiosities. I was touched when Martin Duberman had invited me to an event he was having not too long after I did the interview. And by that time, I had his new book about Nazis, or about World War One,
Mm.
and what was going on in Germany with Jews and gay people. the German government. And he wrote the best interviewer, and he underscored the. I was so touched. 3 words from Martin Duran, and he was kind enough to say in the interview and afterwards, you know what questions to ask, and you actually wrote down what I said. And he also, I think it's in that interview where he says, and that's not always the case.
Mm.
And I think Bram says that too in his afterword, where he says, "Hey, he interviewed me, and I have disagreements with some of these people, and he got through it all, and I read through it all, and nobody upset anybody else." So he sort of continued a lot of conversations that were going on.
Yeah. Well, and you remind me, Frank, of I still feel there has to be a dancer from the dance film, a boy's own story. There's like so many iconic gay novels that have just never been turned into films. And, you know, uh, James Baldwin's novels. Um, so hopefully, the more that we keep talking about these iconic gay literary texts, the more Hollywood will realize they need to adapt them. But this has been a pleasure, Frank. So, how can everyone get their hands on Passionate Outlier, your book?
Well, Rebel Satori, Satori, Rebel Satori Press has it available. They are the publisher, but you can also. I have been amazed at the number of bookstores, literally worldwide, that have picked it up as an offering. And certainly there's Barnes and Noble, and there's Amazon. I'm also very grateful. The reviews have literally been coast to coast. San Francisco Bay Area Reporter, Los Angeles Blade, Windy City Times in Chicago, Washington Blade, One Brooklyn, the Village Voice, Chelsea Community News, and I have more to come. I have a review in Gay and Lesbian Review Worldwide
Okay.
coming in September, and also Boston Spirit, which is New England's largest, and QWERTY and Gay Cities are contemplating excerpts. I'm working with them on 2 excerpts, which is very nice for me. I appreciate that very, very much. So it has been a real phenomenon for me too. I had no idea. It's my first book, and I'm thankful to everyone who's given me an opportunity to share about it.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. This has been a pleasure. And, I so appreciate your time, your thoughtfulness, just all the history that you bring to bear. Thank you for an incredible interview.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And until later, Frank, I will be in touch.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Frank, so much.